Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Show with your host, Jeff Lopes, where we bring you the world's top athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, influencers, and their journeys to success.
We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Jeff Struecker. What is up, brother?
What's up, Jeff? Good to be with you.
This is going to be a fun conversation. As our audience knows, I always try to bring in guests that I have an interest of talking to and learning about and hearing their story. And obviously, as a decorated Ranger and such a credited military background, but everything you're doing even past that now with your work, with your motivational speaking, with your client base, all that stuff like that. So we're going to just kind of dive into it. You have 5 children?
Yep.
How many grandchildren?
1 wife, 5 children. And 4 grandchildren, but another one's on the way pretty soon.
I love how you marked 1 wife, which is
yeah.
How long have you been married for?
31 years.
I'm going on to this year will be 9. Actually, next month will be 19 years. So
yeah, way to go, man! I think it's going to make it.
That's the plan, right?
Yeah, right.
That's the plan. And I got 2 beautiful children, 14 to 16-year-olds.
Nice.
Let's talk about where you grew up and siblings, and just give me a little rundown of your childhood.
Sure.
I'd like to hear a nice story about it.
Yeah, my parents divorced when I was pretty young, and I lived with my mother. And as a result, my mom moved every time there was a better job offer. So when you say, where do you grow up? That question people ask me all the time. And I usually say, I don't even know how to answer this one, because I moved more than 20 times before even finishing school. And just traveled all over the place. Sometimes 2 or 3 times in one school year, we would move. Yeah. And I got a chance to live in a lot of different places, see a lot of pretty amazing people. But this is what's really, really ironic about my past is I didn't really settle down until I joined the military. And for most everybody, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
But I joined the military, and the Army kept me in one place for 10 years straight, and then sent me back there and did another long tour there. So that military town became home for me.
What age did you join the military?
18, still in school. Yep.
Still in school. How was your mom? Obviously, did you have any siblings?
Oh, yeah. I had 2 sisters, older and younger, and then a brother who lived with my father. We got a chance to see each other a bit, but I lived with my 2 sisters.
So you were the man of the house.
Yeah, well, I don't think you could call it that. Not even close. Even when I was ready to finish high school and move out, I still don't think I was the air quotes man of the house. When I joined the military, I didn't tell my mother. I had just turned 18 and old enough to sign up on my own without getting my parents' permission. And man, when she found out about it after the fact, it did not go over well. For a long time, she just didn't like the idea of a son serving in the military.
So what was your progression when you joined the military? Was it automatically you went right for the Rangers? Like what was the progression from there?
Yeah, I didn't have somebody in the family that was pushing me towards the military. And it really wasn't a spur of the moment decision as much as I wanted to just see if I had what it takes, basically. So the answer to your question is, yeah, I went straight to the Rangers, but I went straight to the Rangers because I had a buddy in school who had just joined the Army in front of me. In fact, he was the guy who kind of talked me into going to see a recruiter. For all of your listeners out there, don't listen to your high school friend if he's trying to convince you to go see a military recruiter, because they're just going to try to take advantage of you. But the recruiter that I went to see was a really, really stand-up guy, and really was very honest with me. My buddy's father, who I'd started to get to know a little bit, when he heard I was considering the military, he gave me one piece of advice that I have never forgot, and it has paid, or it has been true like throughout my entire military career. And he basically said, "Hey, Jeff, if you're really going to do this, first of all, I think you're a little bit crazy, but if you're really going to do this, there are 2 types of people in the military. There are guys and gals who join the military because they need a paycheck and they need the benefits. And then you have the kind of people that join the military because they really want to make a difference. Whatever you do, go work for those second group of people." And man, he was so true. But when I went to see this military recruiter and go talk to them about joining the Army, I just asked him right out of the gate, like, tell me the toughest job in the Army. How do I get into it? How do I sign up? That's how I ended up with the Rangers.
Quick thing, when you said don't believe the recruiters, what do you mean by that?
No, I don't mean don't believe the recruiters. I mean your buddy, because I didn't know. My buddy's name was Tony, my high school buddy. And Tony just tried to say, hey, Jeff, you should go talk to the recruiters. Hey, join the Army. It'll be cool.
Did he join as well?
Yeah, he joined up before me.
Yeah.
And what he told me after I'd already signed the paperwork is, hey, man, they gave me extra money if I could convince you and anybody else to join the military. So I was like, oh, you tell me that after I've already signed up. Thanks, Tony. And by the way, I didn't get that deal. So
did you took advantage of me. Did you serve with Tony?
No, he did something totally different. In fact, we didn't even talk about it before he joined up. I didn't even know he was joining up. And then after he joined up, he's the guy who kind of twisted my arm a little bit. No, the recruiter that dealt with me, man, that guy was really solid, totally straightforward, and also told me, hey, listen, if you really think you want to try this, I just need you to know there's a really, really high probability that you're not going to make it. Just want to let you know that.
What are the odds? Like, what are the numbers? Is there some stats?
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to point or to pin down because there were several steps along the way that you had to make it through in order to successfully serve in this unit. Yeah. And each one of those steps had their own attrition rate. So, I had to go first through the Army's basic training. Some guys dropped out there. Then I had to become an infantryman. Guys dropped out there. Then I went through the Army's airborne school. Lots of people dropped out there. And then when I volunteered and showed up to this assessment and selection program, 80% of the guys who started and didn't make it. And the dudes that did make it 12 months into the unit, it was just such a brutal lifestyle that those guys, 1% of them were still around 12 months later.
When you talk about brutal lifestyle, like when you always hear and you always see, I should say, in movies, how they portray, for example, the Navy SEAL training and all that stuff like that, Hell Week and all that. Is there much of a difference when it comes to that final training, or is it totally different mindset?
When we say SEALs or Rangers or other, special operations forces in the U.S. military, the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, they all have their own specialty and they all have their own training, but their training is designed to basically prove that you have what it takes, that you're not going to let them down on the battlefield. So it's hard. Yeah. All of them are hard. Yeah. They all like to compete about who's got it the worst. I don't want to get in that competition. But the idea here is we're going to make it so tough that if you survive the training, then we really believe we can depend on you in combat. And it's hard. It's really hard. When I say brutal, I mean just like physically demanding on the body. So a lot of really, really smart, really strong, really fast guys that I served with didn't survive because they got busted up, and they were much more talented than I was. But they got beat up and broken bones and, severe injuries, and they may have stuck around the military. They just couldn't stay in this unit because of the demands that it put on the body. It's a rough lifestyle, and most guys can handle it for a year or two.
Give me an average understanding when you're saying rough style, like hours sleep, nutrition, like. Is it always on the go? Are you give me an understanding? Because I'm a Canadian, and so our military is a world of a difference from American military base, right? So give me an understanding of just what somebody would understandably get from a day-to-day operations with a Ranger.
Well, just first for all of the listeners and all of your Canadian listeners, man, you have a great military. I had a chance to, serve alongside or watch them, train with them. I even competed in the Best Ranger competition with a team from Canada way back in the day. So you got some pretty solid warriors up north, eh?
You had to throw that in.
But man, the special operations world, not just the Army Rangers, it takes everything out of you. And I'm talking intellectually, psychologically, even financially, physically. Like it's going to try you in every single way. And it's not just that the training is designed to try you. It is, and it's going to be really, really hard training. But the missions that the military is going to give you are the kind of missions that if you guys can't accomplish it, nobody can. So as a result, and I don't say this lightly, a lot of special operators will die in training operations. And they'll die because those training operations are very, very difficult and very dangerous. And they have to be dangerous in order to be able to accomplish in war what you need them to accomplish. So I don't think my friends understood this who joined the Army after the attacks on September 11th and after the global war on terrorism started. But before that event, there were far more people from my unit that were killed in training than killed in war, because they would do very dangerous, very difficult training. And it was a regular, basically 48 weeks of the year, you were doing dangerous, difficult training. And the other 4 weeks of the year, you go home and spend time with your family.
It's so, hearing it from obviously somebody that's served and somebody that's been there. I mean, you don't imagine that, right? Yeah, I mean, obviously you understand the training is difficult, but people losing their lives in the process it's insane. It's insane. And I do understand it, because you have to prepare yourself for the realistic battles you're going to be in, right? One Operation Desert Storm, which is obviously, it was so widely impacted worldwide, and it was just even us, like it was just, they even made playing cards on it and all that stuff like that. It just became at another level. How long did you serve there? Like, what was your mission there and all that stuff like that? Because it's something that, even like I said, as Canadians, I mean, everybody knows it. Everybody's heard it, right?
Yeah, let me back up a little bit. So I joined the Army in 1987. I had been in the Rangers for a couple of years, and in 1989, the United States invaded Panama, and the Rangers started that invasion. So my first time in war was in Panama, December of 1989. First time getting shot at. First time, being in combat. And I just want to point out that the Rangers had kind of been the spearhead of all combat operations for since World War II for the Army, for the U.S. military. Yeah. So way back in 1983, there was a very small combat mission in the Caribbean island of Grenada, and the Rangers kicked that off. Well, I had a guy next to me in Panama in 1989 who was a Ranger in Grenada, and his first firefight was in Grenada. So in my first firefight, I had a guy next to me who was experienced it and knew what was going on, and he kind of helped me through that first battle. I stayed around the Rangers, and 2 years later, well, actually a year and a half later, 1991, I went over to Kuwait, as you just described, with the Rangers in Desert Storm. And this is the big one, right? Like, everybody in the world was watching it, because you had dozens of countries coming together as part of this coalition force to drive Iraq back out of Kuwait. They took over a country and just claimed it as their own. And the rest of the world said, no, you can't do that. And if we have to, we'll send planes and warriors in there to drive you back out. So Desert Storm was my second time around. And just so your listeners hear this, so by the time I get to Somalia with the Rangers, by the time that I'm taking part in Black Hawk Down, I've been around I've been to war twice before this, and I'm considered the old man at 24 years old with the Rangers. Like, I'm the really senior guy with that much combat experience. I just happen to be 24 years old.
Yeah. And from there, I mean, okay, so you're in there. How long were you actually situated in Kuwait and all that stuff?
Yeah, I was in Desert Storm for about a week, did a big mission on the border to keep Iraq out of the Kuwaiti border. We were on the Kuwait side of the border, and came under fire in Kuwait too. So that's my second, combat tour and second big firefight. But I stayed around the Rangers for a couple of more years. And then in 1993, 2 years later, we get sent over to Somalia, and that becomes the book and the movie Black Hawk Down.
I'm going to ask you a quick question, and then I want to get into that story with the book and the movie and all that stuff like that. When you saw Iraq invading Kuwait and everything you guys went in there, protect, try to eliminate that. What is your mindset when you're looking at Russia getting into Ukraine, which is a very similar situation? Like, do you feel like we should be, even I'm saying we, I mean Canada, the other countries should be putting men on the ground to help the fight? Or do you understand what they're doing right now, which is throwing weaponry and all that stuff like that? Like, where's your mindset with that?
Yeah, a great question, man. As part of the U.S. military during the 80s and 90s, man, they were spread everywhere doing stuff all over the world. And in my opinion, in a couple of places, doing stuff that really other people could have done from the United Nations. It didn't have to be the U.S. Not to say we shouldn't have been there, but it didn't need to be us. So I don't really feel like the world's police force as part of the Army, U.S. Army, but I've always felt like freedom is very precious. And it can easily be taken away. And all it takes is some tyrant on the border who decides, I want that country and I'm going to take my country. And not only is freedom precious for the Kuwaiti people or the Ukrainians, but freedom is also kind of precious worldwide, meaning if the world stands by and watches one country do that to another, then what's to stop somebody from rolling across your border and doing that to you? And I really think the whole world has to respond. How they respond is different from every country in every battle, because maybe you respond with words, maybe you respond with embargo, maybe you respond politically, maybe you respond with money and equipment. And then in some cases, you respond with jets and bombs and warriors on the ground. And there's that whole spectrum. But I think if the world sits back and said, and the United States was historically our position, World War I, World War II, like, hey, what you guys do over there in Europe, we don't care. It's not our problem. Actually, it is, because if it can happen to them, it can happen to you. And the whole world really needs to stand up and say, hold on, you can't just take over another country and claim that it's yours. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Are you ready to unlock your full potential? I want to introduce you to the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast, a powerful resource to transform your life today. With expert interviews, practical tips, and inspiring stories, this podcast is your roadmap to lasting wellness. Here's what a listener has to say.
I used to struggle with my health, but this podcast changed everything. It's like having a personal trainer, nutritionist, and life coach totally for free.
With over 2,000 five-star reviews, we're a podcast you can trust. The Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
It's hard, right? I mean, as an outsider, you hear it, but there's always two sides of each story, and the assistance, and obviously there's a lot of red tape stopping certain things from happening, right? So it's hard as an outsider. Everybody could have a comment, but no, I appreciate that. Somalia. So when you were going into Somalia, days leading up to that, did you guys realize, was this supposed to be like a quick mission? Like, what was the understanding of that all before you guys get in there? Because there obviously, I'm assuming you guys, there's a handful of prep before you guys go into the situation, right? So how much prep was involved there?
Sure. But I'll just tell you, man, and by the way, love the Tim Horton Cup. Shout out to Tim Horton. Tim Horton, you need to sponsor this podcast. I was training in Texas, and my wife is convinced to this day. Go ahead.
That's gonna be our commercial. I'm gonna crop that out and miss it and replay it
and send it to the folks to the leadership up there. I was training in Texas, so we're based in the state of Georgia, and we put this big, huge special operations training mission together with people from all across the nation, all branches of service. We're all going to go out to Texas. We're going to blow stuff up. We're going to jump out of airplanes. We're going to shoot stuff. We're going to train really, really hard. And like I said, do dangerous stuff while we're out there. And I did some really dangerous, almost borderline stupid stuff in Texas. And then while I'm in Texas training, I've been away from my family for a couple of weeks, we get notified, hey, stop training. A handful of you are getting pulled out of Texas, and you're going to get flown to the East Coast of the U.S. And we're going to prep you for, well, you'll find out what you're getting prepped for when you get there. Now, Jeff, that's not unusual for special ops, because anytime something bubbles up around the world, the special operations community gets ready for it. And let's be honest, like 90% of the time, nothing happens and it all fizzles out, which is good.
Yeah.
But stuff had been bubbling up over in Somalia for a while. We knew stuff was bubbling up in Somalia, but when we got pulled out of Texas, I didn't know it was Somalia. I was thinking it could be one of 5 places tonight. I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get there. And then we'll throw this package together with almost no notice and very, very little time to train. And we'll go and kick in doors and kill bad guys and do whatever it is that we're supposed to do. And I just was training in Texas when we got pulled out of Texas and assembled together. And when I got there, that's when I learned, all right, it's Somalia. We're going over there with a mission to go get one guy, which is not that uncommon for the special operations forces. And this is going to be complex in a very dense urban environment, meaning lots of 1 million refugees in a city that's about 5 kilometers wide and about 12 kilometers long.
Yeah.
And we're going to get in there, get this guy, and get out of there as fast as we can. And we started planning and thinking maybe 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. We hope we can get this thing done in about 6 or 8 weeks. And we're 3 months into it when we are still trying to track down the number one guy and take down his organization. And that's when we get into this big fight that becomes known as Black Hawk Down. But it's not the first and the only fight over there.
That long of like I had no clue it was that long you guys were in there.
Yeah.
So you're saying 3 months. So you're saying 3 months.
Yeah, we were over there for about 3 months before we got into that
Wow.
fight. And we had done a bunch of missions in those 3 months. That mission just becomes the one that everybody talks about just because of how bloody it was.
So how much when you do land, and obviously how much time are you spending essentially just scouting or researching the area and doing that? Like, how does that prep? Because I don't think you go in there and start a mission. You go in there, and how many days before you actually prep and set everything down with your allies there, I'm assuming, right?
There's some really smart guys and gals across the United Nations that help do the planning, and they know days or weeks in advance, hey, stuff is starting to bubble up over here. We got to start preparing a mission, hoping that it never happens, but we got to start planning for something. Sometimes weeks in advance, if you have that kind of notice. In our case, we had maybe a week's worth of notice, spent about 5 days preparing for this thing before we actually got there. And when we get there, it's game on from the second that you get on the ground. But that's kind of 5 days is a lot of notice. The force that I was part of, well, these numbers are still classified, but they were able to be anywhere in the world in less than one night.
Yeah.
So if you needed them somewhere, they could figure it out while they're in the planes flying somewhere and jumping in and taking over, an airfield, or taking down an airfield, or taking over a country. They could pull it off on that kind of notice, but nobody wants to do that because you're inviting a disaster if you pull it off on that short of notice. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but nobody wants to do it with that limited amount of planning.
And just because sometimes the movies don't portray everything, there's obviously some scripted writing there. How many of you went in and how many of you came back?
Hey, can I say this to everybody who may be wondering? There's an actor who plays me in Black Hawk Down.
Yeah,
and that movie is exceptionally accurate.
It is. Okay.
Yeah. Now, it's still a major motion picture, and you don't make movies to make a political statement. You make movies to make money. And Black Hawk Down made a lot of truckloads of money. But turning a battle into a major motion picture, I don't know you could do it any better than Black Hawk Down. I just want to say that as a guy that was there. We had a couple of days notice to plan and to prepare this thing. We go over there, and there's a small team that will actually go in on the ground on every mission. That team from different branches of the U.S. military are about 200 of us. They either go in by helicopter or they go in by vehicles. I just happen to be the guy on the vehicles, but roughly 200 of us at max will go into the city. And most of the time we're on a target against a couple of hundred bad guys. Sometimes we're on a target against a couple of thousand, but you don't know because of how dense the population is, what you're going to get into till you get there. And I will tell you that when we were in the big battle that became known as Black Hawk Down, It's 200 of us against about 20,000.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter how good your training and your equipment
It's a numbers game.
Yeah, when you got those kind of numbers, you're going to get the same math formula with the same results every time. So roughly 18 hours later, half of us are killed or wounded.
Wow. Talk about the actor, and I just did a little research. Ryan Van Holtz. Did you get to meet him prior to this? After, like, how does that work when they're trying to, like, do they approach you first and say, "Listen, we're going to be doing this. Here's the actor. This is what the line is going to be." Do you have to prove anything? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, well, okay. So here's the no in Jeff Knows show on why did Jeff end up in the movie Black Hawk Down. Up until this point, I had a personal policy of never, ever speaking to the military or the media. I've just seen them distort news broadcasts and report false facts. And my buddies who did interviews, what they said and what that interview showed were radically different. So every time there was a camera in my face, I just pushed the camera out of my face and said no comment, which means that I was basically invisible to the media for most of my career. After Somalia, and we make it back to the United States, and my commanding officer says, "Jeff, there's a reporter waiting in the conference room, and you're going to go talk to him and tell him what happened on the Humvees." And I said, "No, sir, I don't do that." And he's like, "No, I don't think you heard me. I'm not asking you. You are going to tell, I'm ordering you. You are going to go talk to this reporter." So kind of against my will, I sit down, and this reporter has an intelligence officer in the room next to him. And he starts asking me questions. And I'm like, "Can't answer that. That's classified. Can't talk about that. I'm not authorized to discuss this." And that intelligence officer keeps saying, "Yeah, you can talk about that. Yeah, you can answer that." I'm like, okay, first of all, nobody gets to know these things. How come this guy's getting to know it? And then finally, the intelligence officer says, "All right, stop. You can tell this guy everything." To this day, I have never heard of a guy getting access to everything the way that this reporter by the name of Mark Bowden got access to everything. I still don't even know how this happened. So Mark Bowden writes a series of news articles. He's working for the Philadelphia Inquirer at the time, and they release them every day on the internet, and it breaks the internet. That's how many people start reading these news articles. And of course, it becomes a book contract, which immediately goes to the bestseller list and stays there for like ever.
Yeah.
And while it's on the bestseller list, they start talking about movie script. And Mark Bowden writes the first copy of the script, which becomes Black Hawk Down. I'm sorry, I haven't answered your question yet. There's an answer here.
Yeah.
So when Bowden was doing this article, I was thinking, surely they're not going to use my real name. And I didn't want my name in the press because I'm an undercover special operations guy, and my name being in the press makes it really hard for me to stay undercover. So the news article comes out and it's got my name all over it. And then when the book comes out, I'm thinking, well, now the news article is one thing, but the book is about, selling copies. So surely they'll change the name. And they didn't. So then I catch wind. I didn't even know they were doing this. I catch wind about the movie. And I had no idea that they were going to include my character. I just assumed that they wouldn't put me in the movie. When I heard that they're going to put me in the movie, I begged and pleaded with them, please don't use my name. I want to stay undercover. And a buddy of mine calls me and says, "Jeff, I'm having breakfast in the dining facility, in the Army dining facility this morning, and sitting across the table is an actor wearing your uniform that has your name on it." And I'm like, no way. Surely they didn't give authorization. Long story short, the Army authorized the production crew and the studio and the distributing company to use the real names for most of us. And the guy who played me in the movie, man, he did a great job. But to this day, I wish my name never was associated with the movie, because from that point forward, I was never able to remain undercover anymore. Like, people recognize the name for the next 20 years.
Okay, let's play back. This is such a crazy story. How old are you at this point? Like, how many years from there? How many years more were you in the military? Like,
Well, I stayed around the Army for almost 20 more years after
Oh,
this.
you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did a full career. I loved the military. You know, when it was time for me to retire, it was definitely time for me to go. But
Yeah.
I was hooked, man, and I wanted to do it forever. And I was in the Army for about 6 or 7 years when the news articles started coming out. The book came out maybe a year later, and then they started talking movie script. And that's when I thought, well, surely they wouldn't use my real name because I'm still in the Army.
Yeah.
And they used the real name. And from that moment forward, whenever I walked into a room, no kidding, for 10 years, people would elbow each other and they would point and they would say, hey, that's the guy. That's the real guy from Black Hawk Down, because they recognized the last name.
Was there some form of financial compensation to the military? Because the movie and everything made a ton of money. Was the military, and you might not be able to answer this, did they financially gain from this? Because what is the purpose of doing what they did, right?
I did not get 1 penny from the movie.
I'm not saying
Never have saw not 1 penny from the book
you,
or the
but
movie.
what about not you, but the military? I'm saying in general.
Okay. So here's a fun fact that your listeners may appreciate. When the studio first started talking about making Black Hawk Down, the book, into a movie, I think the U.S. military was against the idea because movies had just been disastrous portrayals of what really happened. And then the producer and the director, by the way, you got the two biggest heavy hitters in major motion pictures saying, no, we're going to do this, man. Yeah. Jerry Bruckheimer, Ridley Scott. I mean, you got...
Ridley Scott is a legend, right?
Yeah, movie, right?
Yeah.
So when they say, no, we're going to do this and we're going to try to do it right, they convince the Army, the U.S. Army, hey, we want to do this thing and we really want to honor what happened. We're not going to turn it into a political statement. We're not going to make it more than it was. We're not going to try to make it less than it was. We just want to tell the story well. And the Army said, well, okay, if you're going to do this well, then we'll help. True story. So we're going to send you helicopters, and we're going to send you pilots, and we're going to send you real Army Rangers still on the payroll of the United States Army to film some of these scenes for you. If you're going to do it right, we're going to put a lot of time and people and money into this to do it right. And by the way, this is what makes Black Hawk Down one of the most accurate military movies, based on viewership.
What was their mindset with that? Is it because of the tragedy that happened? Did they want to just show the true portrayal of what happened so people understand it? Like, what was the mindset of just coming out? Because you guys go through so many missions, so many things. Yeah. And this one, why would they allow it to show? And going back to what you said, I'm a huge Ridley Scott fan. So, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you had the best of the best for that, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they really did. I don't know why the A team came together and decided, this is the number one team trying to come together and say, we're going to do this thing and we're going to do it right.
Yeah.
I think there was I don't really understand why the Army got behind this thing, but I want your listeners to know the United States Army dropped $1 million in people and equipment into this movie. And then there was a deal with the movie studio that said, when you make money, and you are going to make money, the first $1 million of ticket sales goes back to the U.S. Army. So we break even.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do this, you're going to do it right, and we're going to get behind you. So there's a scene your listeners need to go back and watch. Seriously, go stream this movie. There's a scene where a Little Bird helicopter flies into the city and lands in the city, and a pilot gets out and runs and picks up a guy from the crash site, throws him on the Little Bird helicopter, and lifts out. Those are real special operator Little Bird helicopters. Those are real special operator pilots. Those are real Rangers sliding down the ropes when you see Rangers sliding down the ropes. But check this out. That scene in that movie, the guy who flew that scene in the movie actually did that in Somalia. Wow. And he showed up while they were filming, and he said, all right, if we're going to do this, let's do this right. And he flew in the movie what he really did in Somalia. And it was the real special operator pilots, real helicopters, real Rangers doing multiple scenes in that movie. And all because the United States Army got behind it and said, okay, if we're going to do this, let's do this thing right.
Did you watch the movie before it was released or after release?
Yeah, so there was a deal with Jerry Bruckheimer, Ridley Scott, Mark Bowden, and a bunch of the actors that we will take the movie to the guys that actually made it before it hits the movie theaters. And we want you guys to see it, and we want you guys to tell us what you think. So they brought they flew a bunch of us together and showed us the movie before it hit the theaters. And man, I'll tell you, like, my heart was racing in the opening scene. I'm grabbing the handles, grabbing the armrest of the movie theater. Like, okay, I'm back in Somalia again. That's how good they did with this movie.
I'm going to ask you just probably one more question. I want to move on to family and other stuff because I don't want the whole podcast to be about this, and what you're doing currently. But when you get back and you walk in your house and you see your children, you see your wife, and how is that process? How is that process in your mind? How is that process of separating what just happened, seeing your brothers left there or the ones you brought back that passed away? Like how is that process? Because I don't think people really understand watch a movie. They don't understand the magnitude of what this carries with you for the rest of your life. How is that process of personally recovering?
Great question, man. And there were a couple of pretty significant conditions about the battle in Somalia that most of my buddies have never got over. I won't go into all those conditions, but I will say, what you see in the movie is a very, very toned down version of what really happened, like not even a fraction of it. And if you saw what really happened, you'd vomit and then run out of the movie theater. So it wouldn't sell any tickets. I had been trained really well as a special operations warrior, a door kicker, to leave what I do at work, leave it at work and not take it home with me, and able to compartmentalize. There's not a switch that you can flip because you're going to carry in your heart what you've seen on a battlefield. You're going to carry that with you for the rest of your life. And there's no way to make those images go away. But I learned how to compartmentalize it and leave it at work. So I didn't talk to anybody about Somalia. I didn't talk to anybody about Panama. I didn't talk to anybody about Desert Storm. I just kept my mouth shut. I didn't talk to my wife, didn't talk to my children, didn't talk to my family, didn't talk to anybody about it. But it's world news, like front page of every newspaper in the world is showing the images of bodies being dragged through the streets and desecrated in Somalia. So there's no escaping it. And I'll tell you this anecdote. So the book comes out, my family starts to learn Jeff was over there and Jeff was really involved. The movie comes out and my mother calls me up hysterically crying. And she said, and this is years now, several years after the battle. And she said, "You never told me what you did over there." And I was like, "Okay, Mom, you just watched this gory, violent motion picture that isn't even close to the real thing. That's not a casual conversation that you have in the barbecue in the backyard. Like, I don't tell those stories because I don't want to put on anybody else's shoulders the gruesome stuff that I've had to see." But Black Hawk Down put it out there for the world to see. And now I don't have to, that's a wrong phrase. I get the privilege of telling not my story or what I saw. I get a privilege of telling the story of the guys that were in those vehicles with me and the incredible heroes that were in those helicopters and on the ground that day. And it's taken me a while to recognize what a privilege this is. But now I try to tell that story as much as I can. And when I do, I try not to talk about me.
I love that. I love it. I love it. What age were you when you got married? And where'd you meet your wife?
Good. We're high school sweethearts. We met before I joined the Army. And then I told her, "Hey, I'm leaving for the Army. This thing ain't going to work out. We should break it off." And I couldn't stop thinking about this girl. So we had a long distance relationship while I was in the Army for a couple of years. I was about 21 when we got married. And we have only known each other, dated each other since we were teenagers in high school. 31 years later, still going strong. I think we might make it too, Jeff.
I think that's going to happen. 21, you were a baby.
Yeah.
Like, it's so crazy. Like, it just,
don't forget, I was a 21-year-old guy with combat experience from Panama and getting ready to go to Somalia or go to Kuwait. Do you ever feel like you were forced to grow up? I feel like I've lived about 5 lifetimes, already. And but at the same time, I also feel like, man, I've got a chance to see and do some things that people only dream of. So,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I mean, it's so crazy. I mean, nowadays, and I'm sure your children are probably going to go through this. You look at your like the next generation; they're going to marry in their 30s, or some of them early 40s. They want their careers, all this.
Yeah.
So you hear that 21, where you're still, obviously, you had the life experience, but you're still a kid. You're still a kid at heart, right? So, and for you guys to deal with all that, like you were once, like obviously on missions, separated for periods of time.
Yeah.
And being able to have a relationship strong enough to go through that and understand that and still be strong and still have I mean, kudos to that, man. Amazing. And obviously shows how strong of a character she is.
Yeah.
And what does your wife mean to you?
Well, she means the world to me. I was just about to say, man, thank you for talking about her, because I stayed around the Army for more than 20 years. I wouldn't have been able to do it without her. And in those last 10 years, get these numbers, I went off to deploy to Iraq 5 times and Afghanistan 9 times in those last 10 years. And my wife kept the family, kept the children. She kept it all together. And the truth is, the only reason why I'm able to be the guy that I am today is because of this incredible woman that I married. And that's not just true of me. That's true of military families. Like they're so amazing. That I don't think most people understand just how incredible these guys and gals are.
That's amazing.
And children too, man. They make huge sacrifices.
Yeah. When you, what is your role, or what was your role, I should say, the last 10 years when you did Iraq and all these other stuff?
Yeah.
Is it more of just more of an outside role, or are you actually physically still in the trenches?
So I had a major change in my career at about the 13-year point, and I went from being a door kicker in the Rangers to becoming an Army chaplain. Went through a lot of school and a lot of training to become an Army chaplain. And, when I say this, people are like, oh, he got shot and got scared at, and he found religion over in Somalia. And I tell people, no, man, my story is quite the opposite. I had this rock solid faith while I was in the Army as an enlisted guy. And during that battle, I was 100% convinced that I was going to die, but I also had total peace. And then I realized my buddies around me, they were not handling this imminent death the way that I was. So that's what set me on the path to become an Army chaplain. Those last 10 years, I served with most of those last 10 years with the Army Rangers, the same guys that I was once with in Somalia. And I was, as much as possible, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I'll just say it anyway. Instead of sitting back and drinking coffee, in a little tent somewhere, I wanted to be out with the guys close to the battlefield and on the target with them. So whenever it was feasible, not always, but the overwhelming majority of the time, I rolled out with my guys and went on target with them and stayed close. I wasn't the first guy in the door anymore. Somebody else did that. But I tried to stay close to the action so that if somebody needed me, I was right there for them.
I love it. So when did you officially, quote unquote, retire from military?
Yeah, I left the U.S. Army in 2011 after almost 23 years of active duty.
Was it hard to separate yourself now going back to, it's just, I've had, man, we've had professional and Major League Baseball Hall. Like we've had a lot of athletes, even we've had a whole bunch of UFC stars, like retired stars and current stars. And it's that identity when you're stuck to something, that's their identity. When you try to separate themselves and retire as a pro athlete, or does that work with you as well? Like was there was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just shoot straight with your listeners. Like I have this great relationship with my wife and children when I retired from the Army, and not a lot of people could say that. But I put a lot of hard work into my family when I was in the Army because I wanted them to know that they were first.
Yeah.
When I got ready to retire, I thought, look, I'm ready to take the uniform off. I'm ready to hang my boots up. I can transition into civilian life and it's going to be no problem. And I really didn't have too much of my identity attached to being a warrior. That I can look back and say that's true. Yeah. But I didn't understand just how hard this transition was going to be, nor did I understand how much I'll miss it. It's been 10 years since I retired from the Army and I miss it every day.
Wow.
And Jeff, what I miss is not getting shot at or going to around the world and fixing the world's problems. I miss the people. Like there was just something very unique about the guys and gals that I worked with. Not just being in the military, the level of discipline and the level of intellect and courage and commitment. But the special operators that I worked with, those guys and gals are unlike anybody else on the planet. And I miss being around people like that, man. I got up every day and almost had to pinch myself. Like I get to go to work today with my heroes. So if you would have told me when I was retiring, Jeff, you're going to struggle, I would have been like, no, it's going to be easy. No problem for me. I've struggled almost every day because of how much I respected and just how amazing those guys and gals are. Not were, but the folks that are serving in the military today still are. Like they're incredible. They're amazing.
Do you always hear how, obviously it's that brotherhood, right? When you always hear how, when a lot of individuals retire from the military, if they don't have, I shouldn't say they don't have, but majority of them that don't have the strong family support that you had, they're looking for that brotherhood. And that's why you'll hear them joining a biker gang or something like that. Yeah. So I guess a lot of people still crave it. And it's just not you. I'm sure everyone that goes through that still craves that brotherhood, that commitment, that friendship, that side-by-side honor of being with somebody you, like you said, a hero to you.
Totally true. That you just nailed it. And honestly, it's even hard to describe because I have close relations with my family and I have friends that I know I can call on. And your listeners all can think of people like, hey, if I'm in trouble, I got some people that I can call, but not like the guys that I served with in the military.
Yeah.
If I asked them, I need you to give your life for me, they would do it without hesitating. And I know they would do it. And they also know, Jeff, I need you to give your life for me. And they know I would do it. And that's rare. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, when you have that kind of relationship, those things are irreplaceable. And that's what I didn't recognize before I left the military. But every day is a reminder of how irreplaceable those kind of relationships are. Quick story. If you got time, my buddy from Somalia called me a few years back and said, Jeff, I need to go back to Somalia because I'm really struggling and I need you to go with me. And very successful Nashville musician by the name of Kenny Thomas, who was in Somalia as a ranger with me. And Kenny said, Jeff, I'm wrestling with this and I need you to go with me. And I said, Kenny, Somalia is dangerous and Mogadishu, because I still am connected to the intelligence community, is the most dangerous spot on earth. I'm a pastor, you're a musician, I got a Bible, you got a guitar. If we go over there, we're going to get killed. And he said, I know, but I need to go and I need you to go with me. And without hesitating, I said, okay, man, if you need to go, then I'll go with you. But I just need you to know we're probably both going to die over there. And he knows if I need to call on somebody, I got some buddies that will literally give their life for me. And I know that Kenny's the kind of buddy that if I said, Kenny, I need you to lay down your life for me, he would do it. So when I tried to explain to my wife, like, hey, Kenny and I are going to go back to Somalia, we're going to Mogadishu, she was just beside herself, like, Jeff, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? Mm-hmm. And when I said Kenny needs me, it didn't register with her like it would with anybody who had that kind of relationship. Like, if that buddy needs me, sure, I'm going to go. And yeah, we might die over there, but he needs me. So Kenny and I went back in 2013. And to this day, I think we're the only people that actually have gone back to that battlefield just because of Mogadishu and how crazy dangerous it is. But we went back there and kind of retraced the route and, went back to the original place. They did a documentary about it. But I'm telling your listeners about this return to Mogadishu because Kenny said, I need you. And I said, Kenny, we're both probably going to die if we go back there. But if you need me that bad, I'll go with you, man. Sure.
So when you went back, were you in civilian clothes? Were you in military? Yeah, you were.
Yeah, we were in civilian clothes riding in this armored SUVs. But even the part of town that we rolled into, the Somali army said, we ain't going in there, man. Nobody goes in there. People die in there. So they were like, we'll take you halfway, but we're out of there when you go into that part of town.
Were you fully armed and stuff as well?
No. Like I said, he had a guitar, I had a Bible, man. That was it.
Wow. Wow. How many did you spend a day in there, 2 days? Like,
Yeah,
how?
we rolled in there. We were only in the country for a day or two. We didn't even let the U.S. or the world know that we were going there until we were on the plane leaving. And that's when we said, "Hey guys, just want you to know we were actually in Mogadishu and we just made it back out alive." But we rolled back into the same target area. And as I said, man, even the Somali army literally said, "Hey, we don't go in there, man. That's crazy in there. People die in there." So we rolled back in there.
Wow, 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 wow. I mean, that's exactly what you're describing before you even told the story. It's that brotherhood that I mean, to the end, what you guys have been through together will nothing could overcome that, right?
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing. Your children, 5 children. Give me the
Yeah.
ages. Give me the ages. Give me the rundown, and
Sure.
and give me their names. And give me a little rundown of each child.
Okay. So the oldest is 27. Our youngest is 20. They were close in age. 3 boys first, Aaron, Jacob, and Joseph. And then we had 2 daughters, which means lots of protection when boys started to get interested in dating their sisters, Abigail and Lydia. Our youngest is a senior in college, just about ready to finish university. And all 5 of them live close to us in town. 2 of them are married with children. We see them all the time. They're at the house hanging out with us. They go to church with us. We're around the children all the time. And Dawn and I, my wife and I, we love our family. We love being around them. Man, there's some amazing men and women, not because of mom and dad, but just because God gave us some crazy, amazing children. And we get a chance to hang out with them. In fact, I was hanging out with them this morning.
I love it. I love it. I am all about, if you even spend a second look at my Instagram account, I'm all about dad life. And
yeah.
And I mean, my kids are 14, 16, and I have such a strong relationship with them. They're my workout partners. Like as soon as they're done here, they head home and grab them. Nice. We go to the gym. We work out together.
Yeah.
We're together all the time. I'm still the cool dad. My daughter's 16 and she tells me everything. We've had this open dialogue relationship from day one where, I mean, we just have this comfortable relationship where I'm dad, but I'm also a friend, and we have that trust in each other. And it's such an amazing relationship with my kids. And I spend time helping other dads. Like I actually wrote a book called Entrepreneurial Dad.
Yeah.
I think having that bond is so precious because time flies. Like your children are all adults pretty much, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you see how time flies, and being able to still have that connection, right. Still have them close to you and beside you, and be able to be part of. How many grandchildren do you have now?
We have 4 with a 5th one on the way in just a few weeks.
That's a huge family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Christmas and
them, like,
holidays.
Early, have lots and lots of babies. We want a whole bunch of grandchildren.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk quickly about what you're doing now. Your transition, you wrote books, you do public speaking. You work on leadership program as well? Yeah,
like I teach a little bit of leadership at the seminary level, at the master's and PhD level. But what I'm really trying to do is just help influence guys and gals, specifically guys, but guys and gals about my faith. Yeah. So the books are all designed to kind of, tell stories about my faith. The podcast that I host right now, it's all designed to just tell amazing stories and when it's appropriate to introduce, stuff about my faith in there. And of course, I have the honor of helping to lead a church right outside of this military base that my wife and I spent almost our whole career. So a church that's full of military families, and get a chance to try to influence their faith a little bit too. That's, the thing that I want to spend the rest of my life doing is trying to help people, strengthen people at the soul level is what I call it.
So when you are doing, working outside the military base, do you ever have any pushback, or how does that all work within the military? Are they very open armed to it, very open to it? Like, how's that mindset when it comes to doing that? Because are they very open to allowing everything to open up and come in, or do they close their doors to certain aspects? Yeah,
I've found the U.S. military to be very gracious about faith, but I'm also, and I think maybe they trust me. Yeah, I'm not the guy who's going to make you feel stupid or make you feel guilty. Good. Excuse me. I'm the guy who's just going to try to encourage you a little bit and challenge you. And I try to do it in a way that doesn't, not upset people, but doesn't I'm not hostile with it. I get lots of opportunities to talk about faith to military audiences.
With I asked you before, but I don't think we even got to it because we started talking. The actor that portrayed you, Ryan Van Holt, did you ever have a chance to meet him?
Yeah, we
did?
spent, sorry, man. We spent about a day together before he started filming the movie. And then he contacted me during all of those.
No worries.
Man, you'll have to edit that out. During all those key scenes in the movie, he contacted me and we stayed in touch during the filming.
Awesome. Toronto, Canada, or Canada in general. Have you been to Canada before?
Yeah, only once or twice, and only cities along the border. Let me tell you, man, I am so impressed with the beauty of your country. I'm really impressed with your country's military, and I would love to spend more time up there if I get the opportunity.
Yeah, I love it. Where are you based out of right now?
Georgia, South Georgia, where
Georgia.
it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity. So a little bit different than Canada.
It's pretty humid right now here. We've had a pretty warm summer. It's pretty humid right now here. This is awesome. If you're going to leave something with our audience, what would you like to leave with our audience?
Well, I just want to say it again, man. The privilege that I had in the military was the people that I worked with, man. They're amazing. And when you're around guys and gals like that, you can't help but become, excuse me, you can't help but become pretty a better person being around people like that.
I love it. Where could our audience get a hold of you?
Best place to find me I'm on all of the social media platforms, but just if you want to tune in to the podcast or the articles or the books, just go to jeffstruecker.com.
Very, 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 very good. And how often do you release your podcast?
Weekly.
What episode are you guys on?
Yeah, we're about to drop episode 51. We're coming up on the first year mark, and man, it has been a blast.
Yeah, we just passed year 2 on this show. We're on episode. If I'm not mistaken, you're going to be episode 192, 193 already.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I've been a guest on, in the last 2 years, maybe 130 episodes.
I was going to say, you got about a bajillion. I don't even know if that's a real number, but you got about a bajillion downloads and followers. So way to go, Jeff.
I appreciate this, man. This has been a really great conversation. You meet people and sometimes they put a persona on. Everything about you is authentic.
Thanks, man.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate everything you've done and everything and obviously thank you for your service. And I'm obviously coming from Canada. So, I mean, we're all affected worldwide when something comes down like that. Right. So I appreciate everything you've done. And I love that you're a family man. I love that you're married for 31 years. I love that you have 5 kids, 5 grandkids with the other one on the way. I mean, everything about you is authentic. So I appreciate that. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm sure I'll have you back again, probably sooner than later. And anything you need, and if you're ever in Toronto, Canada, I'd love to grab a bite and hang out in person.
Thanks, man. I love that.
And I appreciate everything you do, buddy. Thank you so much.
Tell Tim Hortons to hook you up with some sponsorship. But let me say this real quick to your listeners, man.
Yeah.
I've been on battlefields all around the world, and there have been Canadian and UK Commonwealth brothers and sisters right next to me. And I just want to thank you guys for the time that you spent, in the sand and bleeding and serving right next to us. Thank you.
It's been awesome, brother. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff.